Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the How a Bill Becomes a Law advocacy training. My name is Lily, and I am the Arizona Food Bank Network's Agency Training Coordinator. Today, we have Jessie Gruner with us. She is a registered dietitian and is the Director of Community Innovations at Pinnacle Prevention. Here at the network, we partner with Pinnacle Prevention on anti-hunger advocacy at the State Legislature. So we are very, very excited to have Jessie here with us today and giving us some insight on how a bill becomes a law. So we'll go ahead and hand it over to Jessie.
Thanks, Lily. We are so excited to be here today, Pinnacle Prevention. We just love getting the opportunity to partner with the Food Bank Network and all of your local agencies. So I'll go ahead and jump in. I'll share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so as Lily mentioned, I'll be talking today about how a bill becomes a law in Arizona. And this is one of my favorite topics that we get to talk about in policy work. So just a little bit of background first about Pinnacle Prevention. We are an Arizona-based nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to growing healthy families and communities in Arizona. And we do that through some food systems work, particularly around hunger, and also through active living opportunities. So those are two of our core missions. And a lot of the work that we do to advance these in communities is through our policy work at local and state and federal levels. So that's why today I'll be covering some of the work that we've done at the state level to help advance some of our food systems work in Arizona. And that is our lovely team. Okay, so today I'll just be covering 4 basic sections. I'll talk about the basics of how a bill becomes a law, walk through the process with you. I'm going to give an example of how a recent bill that we just helped get across the finish line here in Arizona, the Double Up Food Bucks bill. I'll talk a little bit about that crazy journey that we went through just this last legislative session, and then talk about some further opportunities to continue to engage in advocacy work. And hopefully this meeting and presentation today will inspire you to stay engaged and to feel more confident as you navigate the system and how a bill becomes a law. Okay, so let's jump right in with the basics. So this is going to kind of take you back to maybe some Schoolhouse Rock. If you grew up with that theme song might be coming in your brain right now. But essentially in Arizona, just like at the federal level, we have 2 chambers of government, or 2 chambers of our legislative branch. So the first one is our House of Representatives, and the second one is the Senate. We have 30 legislative districts. So our state is broken up into these lovely legislative districts. So you can see they're based on population. So you can see in the Phoenix, Maricopa County metro area, you get a lot of districts that are really close together, as that's our most populous area in the state. Also towards Tucson, you get some smaller in terms of geographical distance that the district will cover. And then as we kind of spread out further into the more rural areas, you'll see the districts really cover a large volume of our state, especially District 7. District 7 is just covering such a span of our northern region and also into our eastern region. So that's, just a couple of elected officials are having to represent just changing climates, demographics. So that is can be really challenging to navigate as those districts get really, really big, and also just traveling through them. So in the larger districts, representative might be having to drive hours just to get from the one part of their district to another part. So that's how the state is broken up. And then this comes into play because in the Senate, we get 30 senators. So we get 1 senator from each district, and we get 60 representatives from 2 from each district. So we have a total of 90 elected officials. That means that each one of those 30 districts has 3 people that represent them at making bills at our state legislature. So again, those bigger districts that have to cover a wider span of area, sometimes it can get really challenging when you only have 3 people that are voicing representation, right? So that's how we break up our districts in Arizona. If you're interested in finding your legislator, so who in your geographic area represents you down at the Capitol, I've got this great website here. This is the one that we use at Pinnacle. There is one on the AZleggov website as well, but this one I just think is nice because it's a one-stop shop. So once you click on this link, which I'll have in the resources or in the slides, once you click on the link, all you need to do is type your address and it takes you to this great page and it shows you your district. So it's got my district. I just typed in our address. We're in Chandler, Pinnacle Prevention. We're located in Chandler, which is just in the southern part of Maricopa County. And so if you look at the state level, those are our 3 representatives or 3 members of our state legislature that cover our area. So our 2 representatives are listed first, and then our senator is listed in the upper and lower chambers. So sorry, the 2 lower chambers is considered the House of Representatives, and then the upper chamber is then considered the Senate. So that is, and then the district is we're located in District 17. And then I know you're going to get some further advocacy training on the federal level. So there's our federal legislators as well that will represent us in Washington, D.C. So in terms of how long our members elected and serve, so what's kind of unique about Arizona is that both of our chambers overturn every 2 years. So that means that every 2 years, everybody is running for re-election. So it's a really short cycle to serve. And so essentially they're always campaigning is another way to look at it. And their term limits are 4 terms. So you can do 4 terms in the Senate, and then you can move over to the House and do 4 terms in the House. So you can, number of legislators have served in both chambers, and but they eventually will term out once they've reached 4 term limits, or 8 years total in each chamber. Okay, so now we kind of have some of the lingo and how it's kind of people are elected into our state legislature. We'll talk a little bit about the process. So I have this graph here, and I know it can be a little overwhelming. These are all the steps, so it's a lot to cover. I'll try to stay out of the weeds, but I'll walk through it step by step with you and give you some other hints and tricks along the way. Okay, so a bill can start in either chamber. It can start in the state Senate or the House of Representatives. So at the very top here, you'll see on the left-hand side, if it starts in the Senate, a bill receives a bill number. And if it has an SB in front of it, that means it's a Senate bill. And then Senate bills always start with the number 1 because they're the upper chamber. And in the House of Representatives, it'll always be an HB for House bill. And then it always starts with, those bills will always start with a 2. So that's kind of, you can always tell if it's a House bill or a Senate bill. So let's, just for the sake of talking about it, it doesn't matter which chamber we start in because the bill has to work through both chambers to get passed into law. So it's got to work its way through both the Senate and the House in order for that governor to put their signature on the bill and pass it into law. So as we walk through the process, we'll just start over the Senate, but it can start in the House. It doesn't matter where the bill originates. So if you start we'll start in the Senate in our theoretical example. So again, the first thing that happens is that piece of legislation gets a bill number, it gets assigned a number, and then it gets what's called a first and second reading. This is just a formal reading of the bill to assess the contents of the bill, what the bill is about. And really quick, before I go any further, I wanted to talk about, because this comes into play at the start already, this part in the process, who holds the power down at the Capitol. So the first person is going to be the Senate president, because they're in the upper chamber and they're responsible for deciding which bills get heard, what bills get assigned to certain committees, and so any of the rules or procedures. So they really do hold the most power down at the legislature, and also the House Speaker as well. So they're in charge of all that's happening over in the House, what bills get assigned and what bills get heard, and the order and the agenda. So they have a lot of power in just deciding what bills are going to be listened and heard and go through the formal process. Because if a bill doesn't get even a first or second reading or make it into a committee, the bill's dead. So the Senate president and the House Speaker are really responsible for making those agendas and moving the bill through the process. The next people in power, I would say, are the committee chairs, because as a chairman or woman, I get to decide which bills are going to be heard in committee. And if I don't like a particular bill, I don't want to hear a particular bill, then I don't have to put it on my committee agenda. And then that essentially kills a bill as well. On the flip side of that, if there's a bill I really like, I can hear it very quickly and I can move it through my committee, no problem. So the committee chairs also hold a lot of power. And also the committee members. So those committee members are responsible for getting a bill out of a certain committee, and we'll talk about committees in just a second. So those are kind of the power holders of the process. And this will come more into play as we work through, and I'll kind of bring this up again. So again, that first and second reading, that's really where your Senate president's gonna be holding some power right now and deciding which bills are getting heard, what bills are making it onto agendas. And the committee assignment, so once the bill is read and the contents are understood, it receives a committee assignment, which just is directs it to kind of the subject matter experts, if you will, the committee experts that can help to get expert testimony, hear the arguments for and against a bill. And so that those committees are really what help to drill down a bill. And those are, again, influenced by the Senate president and the bill topic. So what committees a bill is assigned is really dictated by that Senate president and the topic of the bill. So really quickly, there's a number of committees, and all senators and representatives, they serve on committees. So that could be based on experience. So we have a lot of for example, our members that serve rural areas will probably serve on a rural committee, rural affairs, that just deals with some of the things that are happening in the rural parts of our state versus the urban parts of our state. So whatever kind of background and expertise, we've had a lot of, dentists and doctors and other health professionals that will serve on the health committee. Similarly, we have some former or current educators that will serve on the education committee. So it really depends on, what kind of assets a legislator brings to the table, what kind of committees they'll serve. But here's a list of the Senate committees. So there's a number of different committees where all of these bills will get assigned depending on their topic. And they're pretty similar in the House. They're sometimes a little bit different. And again, how these committees are made depends on really the who's ever in power. Sometimes they'll fluctuate also if there's a certain group of legislators that might have a different level of expertise, or they might add and combine committees. So we've seen that happen a lot with like agriculture. That committee has fluctuated a little bit. Like in the Senate, you'll see it's natural resources, energy, and water. And then in the House, it's land, agricultural, and rural affairs. So it could also be natural resources and energy. So again, these topics can kind of fluctuate a little bit depending on who's in power and who's down at the legislature. Okay, so now that we've talked about committee assignments, after the bill is assessed for the content, and it's like, okay, this bill has to do with agriculture, it's going to go to the Agriculture Committee. Then that committee has to have a hearing on the bill. It has to make a committee agenda, and that's when experts like you, like anyone that can provide knowledge, expertise, or just lived experience on a bill, can go and provide public testimony and encourage legislators to vote and just allow public comment for the bill. All bills will go through a process called rules, and that's just essentially, I like to say, it basically just assesses a bill to make sure it's not violating any current state laws, right? So if you pass a bill that violates an existing state law, then you're going to eventually have a conflict. So the Rules Committee is really responsible for making sure that it abides by Arizona current statutes. And then it goes to what's called caucus voting. So essentially all the Republicans, all the Democrats get together in their respective committees, I'd say, or their respective parties, and they decide how they're going to vote on a bill. They talk about how they want to vote on a certain bill, so that when it goes to the whole committee as a whole, which is the entire Senate or the entire House of Representatives, they either know that they have the votes to pass the bill, because once a bill is on for a final vote. If it doesn't have the votes to pass, that bill dies. So that caucus voting is important for ensuring that they, have all the votes they need to get a bill across the finish line, or if there's going to be debate and discussion. So the committee of a whole, that's another opportunity for the whole chamber to come together and discuss the merits of a bill. So again, it's more broad. It's not just that specific committee. It is up to the whole entire chamber, and that's where they can allow debates. You can also introduce amendments during the committee as a whole. So committee as a whole can actually take a long time. If it's a controversial bill, lots of discussion can happen. So that's one of the last opportunities to make changes to a bill, is the committee of a whole. After that, after all the changes or amendments are made to a bill, it'll go to something called a third and final read. And that's just what the final bill is going to be. There's no more debates. And that's where everybody submits their formal vote on how they're going to vote on a certain bill. And they can explain their vote, but they cannot debate or add any additional amendments at this point. That's the bill is in its final stage. So once it passes through that period, it'll go over to the opposite chamber. So if it was in the Senate, it needs to go over to the House and work all the way through that process again. Or if it's in the House, it needs to go over to the Senate and work all the way through that process. Again, it's similar in both chambers. So once it's gone through that, if the two bills go through both sides, the House and the Senate, and they're the same, then it'll go immediately to the governor's office for a signature. If the two passed versions of the bill, the Senate version, and it makes it through the House with the same exact version, then it can go straight for signature. However, if there's any changes that happen, because there's lots of opportunities for a bill to change. So let's say someone in the House doesn't like something that happened in the Senate or wants to make a modification. So the House version ends up looking a little bit different by the end of the third read. And so those bills are no longer equal. The bill that passed in the Senate is not the same as the bill that passed in the House. Well, and that's the case, then it goes to something called a conference committee, and that's just a way to make sure and resolve any differences between the two bills. So that at the end, the goal of conference committee is to get one uniform bill that will pass in both the Senate and the House. So then it goes back to each chamber for a final vote before it goes to the governor's office for signature. And once the governor signs the bill, then it's enacted into law. So that's the process. So I know that I kind of gotten a little bit of the weeds in some of the steps, but I'm going to take you through an example that we just did with our double up food bucks bill to hopefully finesse and get you comfortable with how it works with an actual bill. So before I start, I just wanted to give a little bit of background. The fruit and vegetable, I got a random comma in the word vegetable there. Don't know how that happened, but there it is. The fruit and vegetable incentive bill, it appropriates, and that should be $1 million. I don't know why it says 100,000. I missed another comma. Maybe that's where my comma must have gone. Apparently it went to the E in vegetables, but it appropriates $1 million of the state general fund to provide funding for a produce incentive program for SNAP participants. So many of you might be familiar with a program called Double Up Food Bucks. So Double Up Food Bucks is a fruit and vegetable incentive program that provides SNAP families with additional dollars to spend on locally grown fruits and vegetables. So essentially for every dollar they spend using their SNAP benefits, they'll get an extra dollar to spend on locally grown fruits and vegetables. So these two pictures kind of depict, if you spend $20 with SNAP benefits, you can get $40 total when you have your SNAP benefits plus the double up match. So you can really have your food budget can be extended by using this program. It's also great for our local farmers because that extra additional match is only on locally grown produce. And then it's also great for economies. So we have many double up locations throughout the state. But one great thing about that is it helps to keep our funding and our SNAP dollars in our local economies. About 99% of SNAP dollars go to big box stores like our Walmarts and our, Targets and our Krogers and our, all of those bigger, larger grocery chains. So the Double Up Food Bucks program is in smaller farmers markets, local corner stores. So it helps to just keep that money in the local economy. So we call it a win-win-win. And so the goal of this bill was to increase funding so we could get some additional state dollars for the program. And that just helps to sustain the program. We rely mostly on federal dollars. And, the fear is that as we expand and as participants become, reliant on the Double Up program. We just don't want to see it go away. So the state extra dollars will help to sustain it and secure more sustainable funding for the program. So that's the purpose of the bill. So I'm going to walk you through the process that the bill went through. It gets a little crazy, so I'll do my best to kind of walk through some of the nuances that happened this last legislative session. So I'm going to start over in the House of Representatives. So the bill was HB 2668. So again, that HB just means it's a House bill, and it's got that 2. That also means it's in the House. So it received a first and second reading, and then it went for a committee assignments because it's an agriculture-based bill. It helps local farmers. It did receive an agriculture committee assignment, but it also received a health and human services assignment. Oh, I'm sorry. Not in the Senate, it did. In the House, it only went through health and human services, and then also went through appropriations. So appropriations is the committee that just deals with any kind of bills that have funding. So if you're asking for funding, you need increased funding, new funding, whatever the case may be, it always will go through appropriations. Appropriations is, as you can guess, is tasked with deciding how we're going to spend state revenue. So that's kind of the 2 committee assignments. Because it was asking for that $1 million, it's automatically going to go to appropriations. And then because it increases the consumption of fruits and vegetables, it also can get a health and human services assignment as well. Okay, let me just move this. Okay, so in February, it passed the Health and Human Services Committee. So when you see the vote of 801, that means it passed with 8 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 non-voting because they were absent during the time of voting. Then it moved over to the Appropriations Committee, and it passed the Appropriations Committee 11-1. And then again, it goes to Rules Committee, as every single bill does. And then it moved to the Committee of a Whole. And then it finally got the 3rd floor vote, and that passed 40-19. So that means that it had 40 yes votes, 19 no votes, and 1 not voting. Okay, so then it moved over to the Senate. It got a first and second reading, and then it received committee assignments. It only was assigned to the Appropriations Committee, and then it stopped. So as I said before, there's a lot of steps to this process. And so one of the reasons that this bill stopped and it didn't go further was because there was what we call a mirror bill, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But what happened to this original House version of the bill, it parked in appropriations. It didn't receive a hearing. So eventually it became what's called a striker bill, where it means it strikes everything that was on the original bill and it becomes a whole new brand new bill. It's a really kind of a tool that a lot of legislators will use if their bill essentially has died and there's another bill that's floating around that hasn't died yet, then it'll kind of take over that bill, strike everything from it, and that'll become the new bill. So if you look at HB 2668 now, it is no longer the Double Up Food Bucks bill, it's the housing bill. So that's what happened to this one, but that was okay because we did something called mirror bill. So that means that we introduced the same bill in the House and the Senate. So instead of having to work its way through the House and through the Senate, and it only gets that kind of one shot at life, the mirror bill gives it a second opportunity. So as you can see, it's very challenging to get a bill through this entire process. So having another bill that's a duplicate bill just gives it another opportunity to get heard and make it through both sides, the Senate and the House. So that's what luckily we had done. And the Senate version of the bill was moving very quickly through everything. And so in that case, we no longer needed the House bill. And so that's why that other House bill became a striker. And that was totally fine because our Senate bill was still alive and still moving, and we didn't need that House bill any longer. And so that's when it became a different bill. So on the Senate, it received a first and second reading, committee assignments. It only went through appropriations, and that passed in the appropriations 9-0, or sorry, 9 votes, 9 yes votes, no votes, and 1 non-voting. And then it passed the entire Senate oops, I forgot to edit that, but it did pass the entire Senate, and then it moved over to the House to go through the House chamber. So the House chamber gets a little bit tricky, but essentially it moved through everything, moved through all the committees. It skipped the Appropriations Committee because the House version had already been heard. So I know like it's a little bit wonky, but since they'd already heard the same bill, they just decided to skip it for the second appropriations. And then because it is asking for money, anything that has a dollar or a money value that has made it through will just essentially park in the Rules Committee and wait for the budget negotiations to happen. So it just sits there until the rest of the Senate or the House is ready to talk and debate the budget. So while all these bills are floating around, they're voting on all these different topics and conversations, they're also trying to put together this huge bill that's going to serve as the budget for our entire state. So that's all happening behind the scenes. And so they take all of these bills and they assess them and they decide if they're going to put them in the budget. That really depends on who's in power. So right now the Republicans are in power, so they have control of deciding the budget. So they take all these bills that are parked in rules and decide if they're going to make them into the budget or not. And so I won't go through that process because in the reality, there is a method to it. So it starts with all the budget bills get introduced, and then there's hearings on those budget bills, and then they go to caucus meeting like I talked about, and then they go to the committee as a whole and they have a debate and they introduce amendments and they do another vote and they swap the budget bills and they do it all over again. So it's really similar to how a bill passes, but I put this curtain of secrecy because there's so much that happens behind the scenes during the budget process that we are not privy to as citizens. And so that's just part of the sausage being made. And a lot of times we don't have any idea what's going to be in the budget until it gets dropped and they're ready to vote on it. And so that can be unfortunate because our window to advocate for the budget becomes really narrow. So the budget process can get really tricky. And that's kind of what happened with our double up bill. So as I mentioned, we had worked our way, we were parked in rules. But then it was decided that we didn't need to be in the state budget, that we were going to actually use emergency relief dollars to fund some of the double up programs. So it became a standalone bill. It did not get wrapped up into the budget bills. It was a standalone bill at that point. So it passed the whole House by a vote of 46-13. And then it moved to the governor's office for a signature. So we were looking really good. And then we got a really big curveball because there was lots of budget negotiations that were happening. Governor Ducey just happened to veto 22 bills in order to encourage legislators to pass the budget before passing any other standalone pieces of legislation. And our double up bill just happened to be in one of those 22 bills that were passed. So it was just kind of a fluke. There was not a rhyme or reason. The governor didn't oppose of the double up program. We had met with his office multiple times throughout the process. It just happened to be a wrong place, wrong time. And we were really worried that that was it. We thought that would be the end of our double up bill. But luckily, things just change and morph and become something new, and rules were suspended and new bills were introduced. So a new Senate bill 1845 was reintroduced because it wasn't that the governor was opposed to any of the bills that he had passed. It was just in order to prioritize the budget. And so because of that, they were able to reintroduce these bills and they had already made it through the process. So instead of having to go through committees and hearings and everything like that, again, they were introduced first and second reading. They went straight to a final vote, and then they passed. That final vote in the Senate was 27-3. The final vote in the House was 44-14. And then on June 30th, just in the nick of time, the governor signed the bill into law. So that is my double up example of how a bill can work its way through the process. Again, it doesn't always follow that clear path. Although I tried to, give a generic pathway, it doesn't always work like that. And each legislative session is a little bit different and unique. And you kind of just have to learn to roll with it. And you just be ready for any curveball, because no two legislative sessions and no two bill pathways for how it's going to get across the finish line are the same. So we're very excited that we got 3 years of funding for the Double Up Food Bucks program for the next 3 years. So we'll be back at it, hopefully, to get more funding and to continue this program long into the future for the next couple of years. So now I want to take very quickly through the Arizona Legislative website. So let me really quickly just show you this. If you've never been here before, it's called AZlegg.gov. Lots of cool things on this website. You can look at members. You can, if you go to the Senate and the House, you can look at the members and learn more about who's representing you. There's also the Arizona Capitol Television, which, if you're a policy nerd like me, you usually have this going on during all day on the background during legislative session. It's really cool. You can watch all the committee hearings just live from your home. So you can stream it anywhere you can, link onto this website. So that's a really great feature. But I wanted to just go to the bills really quick. If you click on bills and go to bill tracking, you can type in a bill number and you can kind of see where it is in this process. You won't get a cool graphic like I've tried to depict, but you will kind of be able to see more details. So if I go to our original bill, which is our Double Up bill, which was 1150. Oops, that was our agriculture workforce development bill. That's the wrong bill. So bill 1176. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So here's all the steps that it went through. So you'll see the Senate details. So that final vote in the Senate was 28-2. And you can see here's in the Health and Human Services, here's the Appropriations Committee. You can even look at the details. So if you're like, hey, who voted no on that bill? You can show, if you go to show Senate third reading, you can see the yes and the no votes. So you can kind of get a lot of details here. I always like to go to the documents as well. So this will give you the introduced versions of the bill. If you look at the PDF, it'll give you just the bill language so you can see what it says, but I'm not going to lie, you really need a law degree to understand this. So I like to go to some of the summaries are really good that the different committees will put out. So that kind of, I think, does a really great job of just explaining, okay, in layman's terms, and even in layman's terms, sometimes it's really hard to understand, but these do a better job, I think, of just explaining what the bill provisions do. So that's just a really great tool to kind of keep track of how things are moving through the process. And then this will be another video for another time, but there is also this called this request to speak, which is another thing that you can do. And it's essentially, once you can, as an advocate, you can say if you're for or against a bill by just giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down or staying neutral. So luckily we had lots of support for this bill. So legislators, as they're voting, they'll go in to look at this system and say, okay, how many people are for it? How many people are against it? Okay, for the most part, it looks like most people are for this bill. So it might help me to understand how I want to vote as an elected official. So just wanted to share that website with you. If you haven't been to AZledge.gov, it's definitely something you want to check out and use to stay informed. Okay, so now I'm going to wrap up the last couple of things here. So let me just give you the last section. Okay, so staying engaged. So the first thing I can say is all news is local. So we've got some really great local resources that are dedicated to just covering the legislature. So, and they do other things too, but so Arizona Capitol Times, they put out these little green books, which I usually have one right by my desk here, but I can't find it at the moment. But it's this little green book that has all the elected officials, their contact information, what committees they're serving on, all of that. They also put out a daily list of all the kind of articles that are happening. So they they do a really great job covering what's happening down at the legislature. The Arizona agenda is just launched this year. And so I'm just sharing another resource. They also are dedicated to covering all things Arizona politics. So we have a number of news stations in Arizona. These ones in particular, their sole mission is just to cover legislative issues. So that's why I wanted to give a little shout out to them. They're certainly who I've gone to for keeping track of the process. So they've got some great resources too. The second thing I'll refer you to is social media, but specifically Twitter. Most of our elected officials have Twitter handles and accounts. There also is a general one for all of the Democrats and all of Republicans in the House and the Senate. So lots of ways to track kind of what's happening. Any kind of breaking news I go to Twitter for, because someone's usually tweeting about it, even in committee. So lots is happening on Twitter. Hashtag AZLeg is a great one to follow. I just walked you through the AZleggov website, which has the live proceedings, and you can kind of learn more about the bills. And then lastly, taking action. I know that the Food Bank Network is really great about putting out action alerts on their listserv. We do, as well as the Arizona Food Systems Network. So at Pinnacle Prevention, we represent the Arizona Food Systems Network. It's a network of all the different food coalitions throughout the state. And so we help to bring those kind of issues down to the state legislature. And we also have action alerts. So together, we are so thrilled that we get to partner with the Arizona Food Bank Network on once a month on the first Friday of the month at 12 p.m. We do what we call our anti-hunger food systems advocacy calls. So we're blending all of the things that are advocacy related. So I've given you kind of an example of an agenda that we'll cover in the meeting. So we'll talk about what are the current bills that we're following at the state level, and then also at the federal level. So since the legislative session, which I should have mentioned, that usually runs 100 days, starts in January, and it usually runs 100 days. It has to be done by June 30th. We hit that deadline in 2021 by just a couple of hours we meet that deadline. So it was a very long session. We ran out over 100 days, but typically it's about January to April if people are really getting out early, but usually around May is what we see. So we're in the off season right now for the legislative session, and that's when our federal stuff usually ends up kind of picking up. So it kind of works out nicely. There's a lot happening at the federal side right now. So we start covering more of the federal side of things during these advocacy calls. So I invite you to listen and come join us to stay tuned and updated as well. There's the website azfsn.org is where you can sign up to our listserv for the Arizona Food Systems Network, and we can get you registered for the link is sent out to join those advocacy calls if you're interested. And I'm sure some of you listening probably already attend those calls. We do have agency staff that frequent in and out as they can. So just encourage you to do that as your schedule allows. And the last thing I'll leave you with is some resources. Of course, the Arizona Food Bank Network, their Take Action, their advocacy resources are fantastic. They do so much work. So defer you there first and foremost. AZ Food System Network also does some advocacy work, again, on some of the agriculture farming side of things, as well as the hunger side of things. I always like to plug this little video. It's Kids in the Capitol. So I just gave, I guess, like kind of like a grown-up version of this, not even a grown-up version because I'm not a grown-up, but like a fast, I guess, a longer version of how a bill becomes a law. But they do like this really cool 6-minute video and like walk you through the Capitol of how the actual bill becomes a law. So if you have 6 minutes and want just like a refresher and none of this made sense to you, like if fifth graders can explain it better than most adults can for many things in life. So I defer you to them. There's the link on YouTube. It's a fantastic video. I love to watch it every session. There is also a link to create a request to speak account. So if you want to be able to vote yes or no and you're not registered with the legislature, there's a link to do that. We can help you with that. I won't cover that today, but there's certainly more steps, and I'm happy to walk you through that if that link doesn't explain it, but there's lots of information at that. When you sign up, there's a little blurb to explain it. And lastly, the budget process that I tried to explain, PAVCO has a really great tutorial on their website that I just screenshotted, but I wanted to give a shout out because they do a great job of covering the budget process more. So That's all I have for you. Again, Pinnacle Prevention is our organization. If you want to learn more about us, I'm Jessie. If you have any questions, need more clarity on what we just talked about, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always happy to talk all things policy. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Lily.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessie. That was very informative. And we are hoping food pantries like the food pantries on our network and just food pantries in general get more involved in advocacy work. So we hope that this training was helpful. I think that is it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to see our pre-recorded advocacy training. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.